In this next video, I'm going to show you how to start to make sense of the news items that we gathered on eating disorders from the ABC. So what you recall we did is that we gathered all of those news stories and we saved them as as a set of news stories. So we have all of the reports that are in here. So this is everything that the ABC has published on eating disorders in the last year. And this provides the basis that we can do to talk, that we can use to begin talking about if there are any patterns in the way that the ABC has discussed the role media play in promoting or indeed helping to address eating disorders. And I want to show you just a few kind of quick and easy ways that we can use to make sense of the patterns in here, if indeed there are patterns. So the first thing we've done is we've gone to data and we've imported all of those stories. So all I did here was I clicked on documents, and you'll see I saved all of those eating disorders here in my Dropbox, and I just clicked on that. And what that did was it put the stories in here. Then what I did was I wanted to do a few things using if we click on the query button, I'll just make this window much bigger. You recall that there are a couple of things that we can do with regard to analysing these news stories using the text search and word frequency commands. So what I did was I did a very quick word frequency command. I clicked on word frequency and I looked for the top 20 words with 6 letters or more. And I saved the results there. And this is what I got. Now, as a first point of interest, if we look at this list, the thing that you'll see is there's the things, obviously Australian Broadcasting Corporation, because these are all stories from the ABC. But isn't it interesting that the number one media related word that pops up here is websites? And what we could do if we wanted to, so there's a couple of things. Firstly, this suggests that when the ABC have been talking about the role of media in eating disorders, either positively or negatively, they're not really so interested, or this suggests that one of the big focuses hasn't really been on things like celebrity and advertising and so on and so forth, but it's been on websites, on the role of websites. So what we could do is you could click on this, and this will tell you everywhere, and this highlights everywhere where websites are mentioned. Okay, so for example, you could use this in the coding function. Okay, so for example, you could highlight this and you could code it as something like negative. You could record it as something like that. And then every time you went through and looked at stories about websites, you could code them as being either positive or negative. So that's the first thing that you can do. But there are a few other queries that I want to show you that really, in a very quick way, show you how to make sense of the patterns that are in this coverage. So the other thing that I did was, we've talked about the fact that there are all kinds of problems with word counts because they're not sensitive to meaning and those sorts of things. So the text search function could be very, very interesting as well. And I just want to show you something that I did. So I thought, well, what we can do is we can look at a few other word searches for particular types of media that we might expect media to associate with with eating disorders. So what I did was I quite simply, as a text search, simply added advertising. So you put advertising. You hit run query. Then you ask to save results. So you run the query, and that tells you that there are 7 places in all of these stories where advertising is discovered. So again, you can go into these, you can go into this and code these, and see these references. And see if advertising, exactly what people are saying about advertising. But the point is that you save those results and they're there forever. And then you can go in and simply by clicking on, so I've done a similar thing with Facebook, right? So I've gone, well, how often is Facebook discussed? And you go in here and it simply highlights everywhere where people are talking about the role of Facebook. Done the same with Twitter. Done the same with Instagram. But then, of course, I did the same thing with social media as well. And of course, the thing that you'll notice very quickly is that social media, reality television is hardly ever mentioned. Social media is by far the most important the most important result here. Okay, so again, you can kind of go through and see how people are talking about social media, or you can focus on the role of specific kinds of media, and if you're interested in how Instagram has been discussed, that will find that for you as well. And one of the things that we find here actually is, of course, this is a positive story about social media. So we could code this as so you could talk about the way in which the ABC has actually covered stories about how media can help address eating disorders. But this is just a very quick way of showing you how you can use search functions to begin to order your results. And then you can go in and begin coding the results in terms of what they're saying, in terms of whether social media are positive or negative. And then, of course, the other thing you can begin to do is you can begin to tell a comparative story. For example, are there, is Facebook seen as being more positive than Twitter in terms of the role that it plays? But then, of course, the other thing is that we would also probably want to do a text search for websites. And there are many, many stories about that. Because, of course, sorry, don't want to do that. Save results. Because the initial word frequency suggested that when it comes to media, over the last year, there's been far more of a focus on the role that websites play in dealing with, in making sense of the issue of eating disorders. Now that might be because websites are mentioned a lot in one particular article, so like many of them are kind of here. But one of the questions you might want to ask is whether, on the whole, the ABC has suggested that websites play a bigger role in making sense of eating disorders than social media do. So you might actually go through here and look at the number of stories about, so you could quite easily count the number of stories about websites versus Facebook and those sorts of things. So this is a way of, and of course you could apply this same methodology to any to any sort of question about celebrity or gaming or anything it was. And then also, of course, what you're going to do is you're going to go through and use some of the criteria from the question. So, for example, one of the things would be is that how often do we hear from the public when they're talking about media issues? This would be an example of this. So this would be a story about a member of the public. Okay, so you would code this as public voices. So what do people say about the role of media in their lives? So again, this is a very quick, of course we save it, but I think what that shows you is that in a very quick way, by using Nvivo and Factiva, you're on your way to being able to tell a particular sort of story. So for example, if we look at news over the last year, there's been much more of a focus on digital media, on Facebook, social media and websites, than on the traditional kind of ideas about the things that affect body images like advertising and television. And you can begin to tell that story simply by using the text search functions. So that's the reason why, and that's one of the big benefits of using Nvivo and Factiva together to write your second assignment. And we're going to be doing some work on that in the workshops.